Okay, so Yachimo, greetings, Yedase, everybody, for tuning in once again for this final session. So there's some information. Of course, we went into the whole Yahweh character in the previous section, showing that, the divinity Yah is the real divinity, who they stole that title from and manufactured the fictional character, Yahweh, and so forth. Okay, so the previous session, of course, we went into the whole Yahweh fictional character, the fictional divinity. We showed the moon divinity, Yahweh, and so forth, and where they got Yahweh and all of that. Previously, in the first and second session, we went into this whole story, the whole Moses story, that fictional story, and showing who Ma'ah shared, a title of Tahuti, is. We showed the divinity. We showed Ma'asher and Aran, Moses and Aaron, and so forth, who they corrupted Moses and Aaron from. And we went into that cosmology. We want to start off with a couple of things. Tonight, we want to talk about the fictional Abraham character briefly, and then get into some information that most people are unaware of with regard to this notion of the Jacob character. But in order to get into that character, we have to talk about where they stole the idea for this Abraham character. And once again, we're dealing with the divinity Tahuti. So since we already talked about Tahuti as Ma'ah Sher, we can get into Tahuti as Iprehui, and that is in the Kukutuntun, the ancestral jurisdiction. So let's get into that. So just so people can see, this is our book, Kukutuntun, the ancestral jurisdiction. And we get into these fictional characters and we talk about the cosmology and so forth. And what we're doing, in this course is just going into some more detail and showing some of the glyphs and the cosmology and the text that we're talking about in this particular book. So let's scroll down real quick just to recap with regard to. Okay, so you recall we talked a lot about this. So, of course, we talked about Tahuti. We talked about him as Ma'ah Sher becoming Moshe and all of that. The one who voices or commands or speaks, Sher, the divine law, Ma'ah, true of word and all of that. And we went into detail about that and the cosmology behind that. Now, what we want to get into, and of course, we, talked about him as Yah, Tahuti, and Yah, and we talked about all of that, and we talked about Ma'al Sher and Anan, where they get Moses in there. Now, what we want to get into in order to set up this notion about the whole Jacob character, we have to talk about the fictional character Abraham. So we have to talk about the cosmology, which we have been talking about, this battle between Heru and Set, and of course, the battle between Ausar and Set, Heru and Set, and so forth. Now we have this title of Tahuti, a title of the priest of Tahuti, but also Tahuti himself, because he's the one who reconciles the two brothers, Ap Senui and so forth, the judge, Ap of Senui, the two Senu, or two brothers and so forth. That is a title when he reconciles Heru and Set and so forth after they're fighting. But he also has that title, Eprehui, and Up, written with the two horns, is judge, and Rehui means the two men or the two combatants. Rehui, two combatants. You see the open mouth is the R sound, the twisted flax, which is this, is the H. And then you have the coiled rope, which is the U sound, which is plural. But in Kamit, when you have a plural that's dual, the two strokes here, or sometimes the two reeds, which is the E sound. They used to write it as with the letter I for E. Typically now they will write it with the letter Y to represent the E sound. So this will be R, H, U. So RH, re, means man, but it can also mean a fighter, re. Rehu means fighters, men, but in the context of fighters. So in English, you just have, a singular and plural. In ancient Kemet, you have singular, like re would be a singular combatant. Rehu, the U is just like the S in English. It makes something plural. So rehu means a number of many combatants, a number of them. But when you have the dual, there's a separate category in the language of Kemet to identify when it's a plural, but it's two. And that's the E sound. So instead of rehu, meaning many combatants, rehui means it's a plural, but it's two. So rehu would have been many combatants. Rehui, and these two strokes represents the E sound. That means two combatants. And so they show the seated individual with the shroud and the beard and so forth, representing a divinity, but they have two of them. So it's two of them, two combatants, and they're two deities, not just two men, two deities. Who are the two deities? Who are the two combatants? The Rehui in this cosmological context. In this particular story, Heru. Okay, in this aspect of the cosmology, the two combatants are Heru and Set. These are the two combatants, and Tahuti is the judge between the two combatants. Now, let's get up and we're going to go through the story, then you'll see the reason why that's important, and then we can relate it to the whole, Jacob story. So this is in our book, Kukutuntum. We say the whites in our offspring attempted to force Afuraitkaitnit into the false belief that whites had a special agreement or covenant with God. They did this through creating a fictional ancestor for themselves and claimed he had a special covenant with God. They also claimed that this covenant was passed down to them through the fictional sons, two fictional sons of this character. The fictional character was given the name Abraham or Ibrahim. The fictional sons of this character were given the names Isaac or Ishak, and Ishmael or Ismail. So Abraham, Isaac, and Ishmael, or Ibrahim, Ishak, and Ismail never existed. Now we get into the cosmology. The name Abraham or Ibrahim is a title that the whites stole from the god Tahuti. Just like they took Ma'ar Sher to create the Moses character, they took a title of Tahuti to create the Abraham character. And we'll also see that his title Jehuti corrupted into Yehudi, became Yehuti and Yehuda and so forth, and Judah stole that as well. But Tahuti is the divine spirit force in creation that reveals the functions of all things in creation and their relationship to one another. He's the spiritual force that transmits the divine wisdom of Amen, Amenet to our spirits. He's one of the spirit forces whose energy is moving and operating through the moon. So we talked about that, the male divinity of divine wisdom, Tahuti. And let's just show real quick, go back to our book so you can see them, Tahuti and Seshat together. Okay, so this is our book on Tahuti and how he manifests his Sanko Fa and Akan tradition, and Fa and Bodun and Ifa and Yoruba and Afa and Eve. But you see, Tahuti and Seshat are the male and female forces of divine wisdom. They're regulating the times and the seasons. He's the divine scribe, Sesh. She's the divine scribe, feminine Seshat, which is the feminine scribe and so forth. They notate or take note of all aspects of creation. When we talked about the story of Tahuti going up on the mountain to communicate with Ra, the moon going up to unite with the sun, and the spiritual forces animating the moon, animating the sun, and they unite. And the sun gives its light to the moon, and then the moon can be in the darkness and reflecting that light to those of us in darkness so we can be enlightened and we can guide our way on a mundane level. The moon lights your path in the darkness at night so you can navigate your way through the wilderness and through the bush and on earth and so forth. And in the darkness of ignorance, the illumination that manifests in darkness comes from the moon. So the divinity of divine wisdom that reflects the illumination. He's the spokesperson, the mouthpiece of the Supreme Being. Let's pull up this Ocheyame document once again, just to show that also. And once again, we show in the Akan tradition, Ocheyame is the spokesperson. In ancient Kemet, that's Ucheme. And we said that the Ucheme, the recorder, the great recorder, the teller, the herald, the lay priest, the recorder, the orator, the proclaimer, to repeat, to narrate, to recount, to tell a story, tell a dream, and so forth. He is the mouthpiece that repeats or recounts or narrates, tells you what the king wants, what the king proclaims. He's the mouthpiece for the king on the masculine side. Tahuti is the mouthpiece of Amen and Amenet, as well as Ra and Ra and so forth, the mouthpiece of the Supreme Being, of the Great Spirit, and all of that. The spokesperson, the one who speaks what's creation is about, the reality of creation, that's the one of divine wisdom. So let's get back to it. So that's Tahuti. So we said, of course, in your body, Tahuti's spiritual force is operating through your pineal gland. That's going to be important. The pineal gland is a light-sensitive gland. It secretes melatonin and serotonin according to light and so forth, and those hormonal secretions set in motion different functions in your body. Those chemical directives set in motion by the secretion of these hormones, regulates your body's functioning and so forth. Pineal gland is seen as the third eye and so forth, the eye deep within the brain structure and so forth. That is his seat, the pineal gland on the masculine side, and that's Seshat on the feminine side. And then we say Tahuti's spiritual force is operating as your spiritual intuition. In the language of Kamit, one of Tahuti's titles is Eprehui, and you'll see them spell it with AP or UP. Typically today, so you see in the previous popular hieroglyphic dictionary, they transliterate those two horns as UP or up, and sometimes AP is up. Today, the way Egyptologists transliterate that, they'll typically use a WP, up, WAP, or up, and so forth, but they're trying to approximate the sound. But up means judge, and rehui means two combatants. And that is, once again, this horn structure is up, means judge, and then the rehui, two combatants. Now, Eprehui means the judge of the two combatants. For tens of thousands of years, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit have communicated with the god Tahuti and invoked his spirit under the title Eprehui. This title of the divinity was corrupted from Eprehui to Ibrahim, or Ibrahim by the whites and so forth. And we note that Im in so-called Hebrew is the plural, just like you in Kemet is the plural and UI is the plural for dual and so forth. Ibrahui in Kemet as a plural, Ibrahim in Hebrew and so forth. That's the corruption. The two combatants over whom Tahuti called Ibrahui is the judge are the deities Heru and Set. We just saw them. So Heru, one of the spirit forces whose energy is moving and operating through the solar energy at the center or the core of the planet Earth and the core of the sun. So deep within the core of Earth, that fiery energy, and the core of the sun, that fiery energy, and within your core, which is in your heart and so forth, the fiery energy in the core and so forth, that is the divinity Tahuti, that spiritual force that's in the core, the solar force in the core, that is the divinity Heru. In your body, cardiovascular system, whose major organ is the heart. In your spirit, Heru's energy is governing your will. Let's look very quickly at our Afurakani bosom article, just so you can see an image of that. In Akan, he is called Yao, which we talked about last week. That is Heru. His planetary home is the king of the planets, which is Jupiter or Yao Pater and so forth. He's deep within the core of Earth, the core of the sun, and in our physical bodies, our core, the king in the body, and from the neck down, the trunk of the body, the earthly region, the king of the earth is Heru. In the heavenly region, and the neck is the gateway between the heaven and earth, or the head and the body. In the heavenly region, the brain and the sacred, the master gland is the pituitary gland. That is the sanctuary of Ausar, the father of Heru. He's the king in the, spirit realm. Heru is the king in the physical realm. In the physical realm, the heart is the king, sits in the center and regulates the flow of energy, the flow of blood. Blood carries oxygen. Oxygen carries the life force energy to all the cells in the body. The heart regulates the flow of energy or fire or power energy to every cell in the body. That is the king. So that's the human heart. This is the medut or hieroglyph for the heart. And in our Khan tradition, we have a specific kind of achini drum. Of course, the heart is the drummer in the body. And so we have our drums in the form of the heart with the, ventricles and so forth, with the, arteries leaving and so forth in the form of the heart because it's the drummer and so forth. One of Heru's titles is Heru Ami Abu. Heru dwelling within Ami Abu hearts. So we talk about him, governing the heart and cardiovascular system, but also deep within the core of earth and sun and so forth. Now, so in the planetary realm, of course, the sacred planetary home, the king of the planetary king of the solar system, the largest planet, that's the king planet, that is Heru. That's his sanctuary in the planetary sphere. Within the core of the sun, he dwells in the core. Within your body, he's in the core. Within your spirit body, he's in your will to do what is correct. When you exercise your will to do what is correct over things to try to drag you away from doing what's correct, Heru regulates your will. So now Set, the other combatant, is one of the spirit forces whose energy is moving and operating through the planet Mercury. In your body, Set is the spiritual force that is operating through your nervous system and gonads. In your spirit, Set's energy governs your desire. I'm going to look at Set real quick. In our Akradi and Bosom series, he's called Awuku and Akan. That's one of his titles. This is Set. He's called Eshu in Yoruba, just like Heru is called Shango in Yoruba and Hevioso in Vodun and so forth. Set is called Eshu in Yoruba, Legba and Vodun and so forth. Now, he operates through the planet Mercury, the messenger planet that makes the quickest orbit around the sun and so forth. He operates through the planet Mercury, which is called Set, as well as Sobek and ancient Kamit. He's the divine messenger. The reason why the Europeans say Mercury is the messenger planet and has the little wings on his feet, the swift messenger and so forth, the little planet that moves around the sun quickest and takes the energy that it collects around the sun and, flings it out throughout the solar system, is the messenger planet that sends that messenger energy throughout the solar system. That's because Set is the messenger. He becomes the messenger of Ra after the battle of Heru and Set, and Heru wins and he's placed on the throne properly. Then Set goes up in the boat of Ra and sits at the front of the boat of Ra, the front of the boat of the sun. You see Ra sitting there, the solar disk, and then Set right in the front. That's the sun and the planet Mercury right in the front. And he speaks for Ra and so forth. He's the messenger. That's why Eshu is the messenger in Yoruba and the trickster. Kwaku is the messenger and Akan and the trickster and all of that. In your body, he governs the nervous system, which is the World Wide Web, the communicative structure in the body. And we show he's Anansi, the spider, and so forth, and Akan and all of that. So let's get back to it. Now, so he's spiritual force that operates through your nervous system and gonads in your spirit. Sets energy governs your desire. When that energy is moving through your nervous system, magnetism emits. And when you have that magnetism moving through your nervous system, just like you have current moving through wires and it creates an electromagnetic field, if you take a wire and wrap it around a nail and so forth and put both ends of the wire to a battery, then once the current moves through that wire, it creates an electromagnetic field and it becomes magnetized. So that, that nail you put within that, field, the nail becomes magnetized itself. That energy moving through the wire generates magnetism. Divine living energy moving through your nervous system generates magnetism. Through those wires or nerves generates magnetism. So you have a magnetic draw or desire towards things. If you're living in harmony with order, you have a natural magnetism towards things you need that's in harmony with order. If you get hot and you're sweating, you have a natural magnetism towards drinking some cool water, that's a natural desire. If you get corrupted, then your desire can become misguided. Now you're desiring alcohol or, drugs and so forth. You have a corrupted desire. That becomes lust and self-destruct. But he governs, this is why they say, we talk about how he governs the desire. Now, in the language of Kamit, one of the ancient titles of the god Heru is Hek. And you see that H is the He sound in English, the Hek. And we can show when that's translated in the Akan language, it's the Hek sound, Hek, Hek, which means ruler. This is the term Shek, and you see the crook, the shepherd's crook. You see the kings of Kemet and the queens, they're holding the shepherd's crook. It represents rulership. Ruler, governor, director, prince, and so forth. Shek, that's what it means. So when you see a sovereign in Kemet, male or female, you will see them holding the Shek and the Nkaka, or the so-called crook and the flail. That's what it's dealing with. Now, so then that's one of Heru's titles. When he becomes the hereditary ruler, he's Shek. And they give that title to the king. So Ramesses II, Ramses II, Ramesses II is called Shek-An, or the ruler of An, which is Anu, was so-called Heliopolis, the city of Ra. He inherits that title, the ruler, the hereditary ruler, the one that holds the crook. But it's not called a crook, a shepherd's crook. It's called a Shek in ancient Kemet. He is the Shek, he's the ruler. So one of the ancient titles of Set is Smai Ur. The term Smai means to join or unite, yet it also means evil associate or fiend. And we'll see why it means that. A smai, to join or unite. That's like that magnetism. You're drawn together, you join together, you unite. You're drawn to something through magnetism, whether it's a desire for food or desire for an individual, desire for this or that. You join together, unite, and so forth. But if your desire is misguided or corrupted, then that misguided desire becomes lustful, self-destructive, and then that's why evil associate or fiend can be a title of somebody who has a misguided desire, and so forth. But when you see Smai, Slayer is a title of Set, Smai Ur is a title of a bull, a form of Set who is sacrificed to restore divine order. But that Smai Ur is what we're looking at. So get back up to this. Now, so for tens of thousands of years, Afuraitkaitnit have communicated with the gods Heru and Set and invoked their spirits under their titles Shek and Smai-Ul. These titles were corrupted from Shek to Shek and Smai-Ul. Shek and Smai-Ul became Ishek and Ismail, which became Ismail, Ishmael. So Isaac and Ishmael in Arabic is Ishek and Ismail, and so forth. Recall when we talked about in the previous week, the letter R, the rolling R, is in the language of Kamit. In the language of Kamit, we don't have an L, we have a rolling R. So if only when foreign words enter the language of Kamit, like Cleopatra or Ptolemy, when they're trying to, for example, when the Greeks invaded Kamit and they wanted to write their name, and let's look at that real quick just to prove this point. Okay. So this is Cleopatra in hieroglyphs, but number 1 is the K sound. Number 2 is the couchant lion. In Kamit, that's the R sound, the R sound. The lion makes the R sound, the roar. The lion is called Ru, R-U in ancient Kamit, Ru. That's the name of the animal. And it represents the R sound. So when you look at one of the spellings of the name Ra, couchant lion, and then the symbol of the forearm with the open palm and the solar disk and so forth, that is Ra. Cleopatra. So they had, since we didn't have an L, anytime you see a foreign word entering the language and they try to spell it with our text, they have to use one of the symbols for the letter R. So we would say Cleopatra, but Europeans said Cleopatra. The same is true in the Akan language today, in Ghana and Ivory Coast. There's no letter L in the Akan language. There's a rolling R, but there's no letter L. So a foreign word, when you're looking on Akan dictionary, you'll see the word, for example, mulatto. They will translate it in Akan as murato, M-U-R-A-T-O-N-I, muratoni, muratoni. We'll say murato because we don't use the letter L. So, and when you look in linguistics, R and L interchange because when you say ra, ra, the tip of the tongue is hitting the roof of the mouth once, ra, or more than once. When you say la, the tip of the tongue is hitting the roof of the mouth. So if you had K-A-R-A, kara, or kara, and K-A-L-A, kala, kala, and kara, one was an L, one was an R, because the tongue is just tapping the roof of the mouth. So they interchange, they sound slightly different. So when we talk about Ismail, later the Arabs would say Ismail, and same thing with the so-called Hebrew and so forth. So Shek and Ismail came from was corrupted into Ishek and Ismail and so forth. Now, so the titles Aperu, Shek and Ismail, the judge of the two combatants, Tahuti. Which two combatants is he judging? Which of the Rehui is he judging? He's judging Shek, judging between Shek, the hereditary ruler, Heru, who inherited the nation, rule of the nation from his father Ausar after Ausar was killed. And then he's judging between him and Smai-Ur, the great Ur Smai, which is Set. They would then pervert the knowledge of the gods, Tahuti, Heru, and Set, divine spiritual beings operating through the moon, sun, earth, and the planet Mercury, into a fictional tale about a fictional white man and his two sons who were the fictional ancestors of fictional white tribes. So Tahuti is operating through the moon right now. He is Aperu, judge of the two combatants and so forth. Heru is operating through the core of the sun, the core of the earth and so forth right now. Set is operating through the core of the planet Awuku, or the planet Set, so-called Mercury right now. That's always been the case. So they took that and tried to make it some crackers in the Near East, and then Black people foolishly trying to blacken up those fictional characters and make them Black people in the Near East. Now, the stories about Ishak or Isaac receiving the blessings of Ibrahim as opposed to his elder brother Ishmael or Ishmael receiving the covenant and blessings was stolen from the knowledge of the gods, where Heru or Shek received the rulership over certain aspects of creation as opposed to his elder Set or Smai-Ur receiving rulership over certain aspects of creation. The conflict between Heru and Set in their names of Shek and Smai-Ur also takes place within your spirit. Before we get to that portion, let's show a little bit of that. In the Shabaka text, the so-called theology of Min-Nefer, so-called Memphite theology, the Shabaka stone that was, carved in the time of the Qeb-Ausar, so-called Shabaka, 2,700 years ago, talking about the cosmology of Ptah. This is the stone during the quote-unquote Nubitu or Nubian rule in Kamit, 25th, 26th dynasty. We're going to go down to a portion of that text, see what we're talking about with this battle between Heru and Set, or Shek and Smai-Ur. Now, first, the text starts off giving different titles: the living Heru, the excellent of the two lands, the two ladies, Nekabet and Wachet, excellent two lands, the golden Heru, and all of that. This writing was copied out anew by His Majesty in the house of his father Ptah, south of his wall, for His Majesty found it to be a work of the ancestors, which was worm-eaten, so that it could not be understood from beginning to end. His Majesty copied it anew so that it became better than it had been before, in order that his name might endure and his monument last in the house of his father, the deity Ptah, south of his wall, throughout eternity, as a work done by the son of Ra, Shabaka, for his father, Ptah, Tanin, so that he might live forever. Now, what they're saying in that introduction is Shabaka, the pair are the pharaoh Shabaka. Give you an image of Shabaka right quick. So that is, these are images of Shabaka. So that is the king that ordered, that found, he was inspecting temples, found a text, an old text, but it was written on some material that was worm-eaten. And he said, this is an ancient text of the ancestresses and ancestors. Let us copy it down on that it can last forever. So we're going to copy it in stone so it can last forever, because this text is being worm-eaten. We don't want to, lose this text. It was written by our ancient ancestresses and ancestors. So even back then, 2,700 years ago, he found a text that was older. He wanted to preserve it. And as we can see, he was correct. So, we still have it today. So that's Shabaka who was speaking. So that's the introduction. They talk about the divinity Ptah. They talk about Atem and certain aspects of their function and creation. And this particular section is what we want to talk about. So Qeb, the earth's crust, the father of Ausar and Auset and Set and Nebuhet and so forth. Qeb and Nut are the father and mother of Ausar, Auset, Set and Nebuhet. So Qeb, ruling the earth's crust, he turned the rulership over to his son Ausar, but then Set kills Ausar and takes over. Now Set is in control, but then Set battles the son of Ausar, who grows up, and now Heru is like, I'm the rightful ruler. I'm the son of Ausar. The nation should be handed over to me to rule. Set killed Ausar. He's not the rightful ruler. So there's a battle between Heru and Set. And Qeb, the father of Ausar, the grandfather of Heru, he's making a judgment. He's looking at what's going on between northern Kamit and southern Kamit and so forth. And he makes a judgment. It says, Qeb commanded that the Ennead, the great company of the divinities, gather to him. He judged between Heru and Set. He ended their quarrel. He installed Set as king of Upper Kamit, which is southern Kamit, in the land of Upper Kamit, at the place where he was born in Su. And then Qeb made Heru king of Lower Kamit, which is northern Kamit, in the land of Lower Kamit, at a place where his father was drowned. And his father was drowned in a place called Nedat, which is the division of the two lands. So southern Kamit, northern Kamit. So he gave Heru the north, and he said Set can rule in the south. Thus, Heru stood over one region, and Set stood over one region. They made peace over the two lands at Ayan. That was the division of the two lands. Qeb's words to Set, go to the place in which you were born. Set, that's Upper Kamit. Qeb's words to Heru, go to the place in which your father was drowned. Heru, Lower Kamit, northern Kamit. Qeb's words to Heru and Set, I have separated you. One's in the north, one's in the south, Lower and Upper Kamit. So that's what he did. Then he said, then it seemed wrong to Qeb that the portion of Heru was like the portion of Set. So Qeb gave Heru his inheritance, for he is the son of his firstborn son. And then he said, Qeb's words to the Ennead, or the group of divinities, I have appointed Heru the firstborn. Qeb's words to the Ennead, him alone, Heru the inheritance. Qeb's words to the Ennead, to his heir, Heru my inheritance. Qeb's word to the Ennead, to the son of my son, meaning to the son of Ausar. Ausar is Qeb's son, Heru is Qeb's grandson. To the son of my son, Heru, the jackal of Upper Kamit. Qeb's words to the Ennead, the firstborn, Heru, the opener of the ways. Qeb's words to the Ennead, the son who was born, Heru, on the birthday of the opener of the ways. Then Heru stood over the land. He is the uniter of this land, proclaimed in the great name of Tenen, south of his wall, Lord of eternity. Then it says, then the two great in magic upon his head, then sprouted the two great in magic, talking about Wachet and Nekabet, the female divinities that govern northern and southern Kamit. They sprouted upon his head the serpent and the vulture and so forth that you see on the crown of the sovereign. They sprouted upon his head. He is Heru, who arose as king of Upper and Lower Kamit, who united the two lands in the nome of the White Wall, which is Min-Nefer, so-called Memphis, the place in which the two lands were united. The reed, the heraldic plant for Upper Kamit, and the papyrus, the heraldic plant for Lower Kamit, were placed on the double door of the house of Ptah. That means Heru and Set pacified and united. So let's come out of that. When they said the reed and the papyrus, in this image, this is the papyrus, and this is the reed, talking about the watch plant of northern Kamit, and the Nekeb plant of southern Kamit, the lily and the lotus and so forth, the papyrus and the lotus and so forth. And you see that they're representing the two lands that are bound together, united, northern and southern Kamit, in balance and so forth. But first Qeb said, Set can have the south, Heru can have the north. Then he said, no, Heru's gonna have everything, because Set shouldn't have equal as much as Heru, and Heru is really the heir. So that's the cosmological context. That was the battle between Heru and Set. So we said the stories about Ishak, or Isaac, receiving the blessings of Ibrahim as opposed to his elder brother Ishmael receiving the covenant and blessings, was stolen from the knowledge of the deities. Set is the older one. Heru is the younger one. He's the son of Ausar. Set is the brother of Ausar. He killed his brother and took over. Ausar's son comes back to overthrow his uncle, to take over because his uncle engaged in criminality. That's the cosmology. So the older one took the blessings and he was running the country, but then the younger one now said, no, you need to be the one who receives the blessings. Let's go to quickly the contendings of Heru and Set. So this text, popular text talking about Heru and Set fighting. And, you know, the contendings, we're not going to go through all of that, but just to get to the bottom part. So it says, there came to pass the adjudication of Heru and Set, mysterious in their forms and mightiest of the princes and magnates who ever came into existence. Now it was a young deity that was seated in the presence of the universal Lord, claiming the office of his father Ausar. Beautiful in his appearances, the son of Ptah, who illumines the west with his complexion, meaning his face, while Tahuti was presenting the uninjured eye to the great prince who was in Heliopolis, meaning Anu. So, what they're saying is, you know, Heru is being presented, he's the heir, Tahuti is giving him his sacred eye and so forth. Then there is a discussion about, you know, well, maybe shouldn't Set, since he's the older brother, shouldn't he be the one that's ruling? And then there's this contention going back and forth. Now, it says Pra or Ra Herakuti became exceedingly furious. It says pray, but that's Pa Ra, that's just the title of Ra. His wish was to give the office to Set, great in virility, the son of Nut. And then it says, An-Hor, which is another divinity, let out a loud shriek before the face of the deity, saying, what shall we do? Then Atem, the great prince, who is another divinity, who is an Anu, said, have Banib-Jedet, the great living God, summoned that he may judge between the two youths. They asked Banib-Jedet, he said, that's the ram divinity in the north, he said it should be Heru. Then the company of the deities, the Ennead said to Tahuti in the presence of the universal Lord, please compose a letter to Neat, the great goddess, the great mother divinity, the God's mother, in the name of the universal Lord of Ra and so forth. Tahuti said, I shall surely do that. He composed a letter, wrote it to the great mother, Neat, the great mother Neat. Neat, the God's mother, sent a letter back to the company of the deities saying, award the office of Ausar to his son Heru. Don't commit such blatant acts of inequity, which are illegal, or I shall become so furious that the sky will touch the ground. Now, so they're going back and forth eventually, and then, you know, talking about who should rule, and eventually it is declared that Heru should rule. This is just another take on that. And then Tahuti writes that letter, solidifying everything and so forth, and making that judgment, reflecting the will of divine order, and that's what happens. So once again, that's just another take on that contending. So as you can see, we're talking about Heru and Set, or Shek and Smaul. So there's somebody named Iprehui judging between somebody named Shek and Smaul about who's going to have the proper inheritance and will be ruling over the nation and regulating order and so forth. This is where they get Abraham, or Ibrahim, Ishak, and Ismail. Now, when you look, that's the cosmology. Even when you look at the spirituality of it, we said the same battle between Heru and Set, Shek and Smaul, happens within your spirit. They govern your will and your desire. Heru governs the will, Set governs desire. Within your spirit, you sometimes desire to do something wrong, yet your will to do what is right is in conflict with the misguided desire. As one part of you fights with the other, you have conflict. Your desire fights your will. That Set's energy, your desire fighting Heru's energy, your will. At some point, you become spiritually aware of why the desire is wrong, what the consequences of following your misguided desire would be, and you come to realize why it is in your best interest to follow your will, to follow what's right. The part of your spirit which allows you to weigh the facts and consequences and render a proper judgment is your third eye, which is the pineal gland, the seat of the divinity Tahuti on the masculine side, that's governed by Tahuti. He is acting as a judge between the will and the desire. You're pulled in one direction, you're pulled in another direction, but intuitively, the judge says, you need to go in this direction. The judge up between the two combatants, Rehui, Eprehui, Tahuti, Eprehui, or Ibrahim, is judging between Ishak and Ishmael, or Shek and Smail. So, and then You follow your will and you put your desire set in its proper place. When they talk about Ishmael being a rough man of the desert, Set is the god of the desert. Deshert is the term. Desher means red. Deshert means the red land. That is the desert. God, Set is the god of the desert. Same as Qeb-Ausar and Afurakani, he governs the desert. So his hot spiritual forces on earth govern the desert. And then we say Set or Ishmael has been invoked by Afuraitkaitnit as the god of the desert for thousands of years. Set is one of the spiritual forces operating through the planet Mercury, which is very close to the sun, one of the hottest and driest planets. Set's energy also operates through the gonads, which are in the ovaries of the male, female testicles of the male. When you get fired up with aggression and so forth, then you can become fired up to attack, but then you can become overly fired or lustful or misguided and so forth. You have to regulate that energy. That's Set governing these things. And when you look at the boat of Ra, what you see here is Ra sitting in the boat of the sun and so forth, and Set is in the front of the boat, and he's spearing the serpent Aperu who would try to swallow the boat of Ra and so forth. But Set is in the front, Ra sitting inside of the Aten, the sun and so forth, and the planet Mercury is in the front. It's the messenger planet, but Set is also a warrior and so forth. So he will destroy, when he's in his proper place and function, he'll destroy the serpent power Apep that would seek to consume, the solar light and so forth. But that's the sun and Mercury. Now, so we say there was never an Ibrahim, Ishak, and Ishmael, these fictional characters and their false life stories are perversions of the names and functions of gods in nature, the divine forces operating through the moon, the sun and earth, and the planet Mercury, and the deserts of earth through your pineal gland, your heart and cardiovascular system, and your nervous system and gonads, through your intuition, your will, and your desire. So, same thing with the pineal gland, releases, if you become full of anxiety, your nervous system causes, your heart to stop and so forth, and you have misguided palpitations and you become, stressed and so forth. Set operating through the nervous system, misguided, is now negatively controlling your cardiovascular system. Now your heart is palpitating, missing a beat, you're rushing, running and so forth. Set is controlling Heru. The nervous system is controlling the cardiovascular system, and therefore you're not functioning naturally in an imbalanced state. You're frozen, you're tense, you're nervous, you're stressed, that leads to disease and so forth. But when the pineal gland secretes hormones that regulate balance, bring balance to your cardiovascular system, puts the nervous system in its proper place, those hormonal secretions from the pineal gland, from Tahuti's seat, regulate the palpitations of the heart, regulate the nervous system so you're not constricted and tense and stressed and so forth. Tahuti is regulated between the two combatants. So that happens in your body, it happens in your spirit, it happens on earth when the moon is regulating the rising and falling of the tides to cool down earth so it's not, the crops are not burnt up and so forth, regulating on every level of creation. So this stupidity about there was a little white family, Abraham, Isaac, and Ishmael, or some fools trying to blacken up that fictional family. They stole the names, the functions, the cosmology, and tried to place it in Israel. Now, so Tahuti, Heru, and Set, Iprahui, Shek, and Ishmael. Now let's get to this fictional cartoon character, Jacob. When we're talking about Ausar, Set, and Heru. We talk about Ausar as a god in creation whose spirit operates through the star system, Sa, called Orion, that's in the stellar region, through the moon, through the black soil substance of earth. The black soil, Ausar, the red earth is Set, red earth, as well as the red desert. So the black soil, red earth. Ausar's energy operates through your pituitary gland, the master gland in the body, as we said. He has the ability to unify the functions of the various forces in nature. Set, the wife of Ausar, she operates through the star system Sapata, which they call Sirius. So he's in Orion, she's in Sirius. He's in Sa, she's in Sapata. Also operates on the feminine aspect of the moon. She governs the vagina uterus structure, the womb and birth canal, and so forth. And she maintains a unity of functions and operations of the various forces in nature, just like in the body, regulating the various organs and functions harmoniously and so forth. We already talked about Set, the brother of Ausar and Set. Talked about star system is Meskheti, the so-called Great Bear. The desert lands, we talked about the nervous system and so forth. Now, in the story, Ausar is appointed by Ra and Ra'et to rule Ausar and Set, to rule on Earth and so forth, to regulate order. We talked about this in the first week. People go to a shrine, they get possessed by a divinity, they ask for direction, the spirit directs the people, and they can say that, you know, Ausar is directing the direction of our and development of our community, because through spirit possession of the priest or priestess or the king or queen mother, they get possessed by the spirit, the deity speaks through them. So in that context, the king isn't giving orders, Ausar is giving orders through the agency of the king, or Set is giving orders through the agency of the queen mother. So the deities are ruling on earth. And when possession is over, we remember the direction that the deities gave us, and we continue to do that. So then we can make, you know, hey, this is the way we need to procure this medicine. We learned that from the deities. This is the best way to organize a society. We learned that from the deities. Now you're getting, you know, direction from the king and queen mother. They learned it from the divinities, but they continue to perpetuate that. Now that's the rule of the kings and queen mothers. But first there's the rule of the gods and goddesses. So when they talk about the gods and goddesses were ruling on earth, they're not talking about a spirit just comes and walks around and, you know, sets up a throne and people going and so forth. It's talking about spirit possession. So Ausar and Set ruling, they were appointed to rule on earth, show us how to plant and, you know, make medicine and establish homes and establish society and establish civilization and so forth. Ausar and Set. Then in the story, Set becomes, who's the brother of Ausar, becomes jealous of Ausar. He kills him, throws his body in the river and so forth, then takes over the rule of Kamit, rules like a tyrant, forces Set out, she has to escape and so forth. And then, you know, eventually she finds the body of Ausar, connects with his spirit, becomes pregnant with Heru, and then gives birth to Heru in the marshes in northern Kamit and so forth, in the swamps. And then when Heru grows up, he comes to fight Set, defeat Set, overthrow Set, and restore the nation that was regulated by Ausar and Set, restore that balanced nation once again. When we look at the human element of the story, we're talking about people who were children of Ausar and Set, meaning just like someone can be a child of the Orisha Obatala, that's the one who governs his head, or a child of Shango, and Akan, a child of Awusi, like myself, I'm a child of the deity Awusi, which is Ausar. Someone born on Tuesday, a Kwabena is the child of the deity Bena, which is Heru Behudet. A woman born on Monday is born on, you know, under the auspices of Ajua, which is Set. Or somebody born on Awukuda Wednesday or Akuada. A woman is called Akua because she's a child of the female divinity Akua, which is Nebethet. So early on, when we had kings and queens in the beginning, we have people, but they're children of these different divinities. So a child of Set, they may call her Set, or Set, Nefert, or Set, Mary, Ausar, or sometimes just Set because she's a child of Set. A king who's a child of Ausar, they may call him Ausar, Neb, Ma'ar, or Ausar, Qeb, Amint, and so forth, or just Ausar, reflecting that he's a child, he carries Ausar's energy into the world. So we have this human element. The first time a king and a queen mother were ruling and their brother got jealous and killed them, we still have that human emotion behind that story. These were children of the deities. So it's not that the deities would killing each other. It's people who are children of these divinities who are living in society, just like all of us are children of different divinities. But if we get out of harmony with order, then we do things that are self-destructive. So that's what the story is talking about. Set kills Ausar, takes over the rule of Kamit. Eventually, Heru grows up, challenges Set, defeats Set and his followers, and restores the nation. So we already had, and that's the part of the story where it's Heru fighting Set. Prior to that, it was Set attacking Ausar. So there was a battle between Ausar and Set. Then later, a battle between Set and Heru, the son of Ausar and Auset. After that, there's a battle between Set and Heru, the son of Ausar and Auset, and Heru Behudet, the son of Ra, and both of them fight Set together and defeat them and so forth. But first you have Ausar and Set fighting, the two brothers fighting. That's the context of this piece. Now we get into the little fictional character, Jacob. Now, when you look at the little basic story, fictional character Jacob, regarded as the patriarch of the Israelites, important figure in Abrahamic religions and so forth, has 12 sons. Now, they'll first talk about the etymology of the name Jacob, according to the folk etymology found in Genesis. Yaakov or Yaakov, and Akob is derived from, they'll say Qeb, but it's Akob, the way they pronounce it and so forth, meaning heel, born grasping the heel of his twin brother Esau. The historical origin of the name is uncertain, although similar names have been recorded. They talk about a name, they find they always go back to the records of ancient Kemet and so forth, because they don't have original records and so forth. So, and then the name Israel is given to Jacob following the episode of him wrestling with an angel. But before we get to that, Jacob and his twin brother, born to Isaac and Rebekah and so forth. The important thing about the little Jacob and Esau story, they're two brothers and they're fighting. They're twin brothers and they're fighting. They're at each other and so forth. Jacob, Esau, and Esau wants to, he has an inheritance and so forth. Jacob takes the inheritance. The inheritance goes to Jacob, so it's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and all of that. But the inheritance goes to Jacob. Esau wanted the inheritance. Jacob takes the inheritance. Jacob is the blessed one and so forth. But there's a contention between Jacob and Esau. Just like there's contention between Isaac and Ishmael. That's the same cycle when they stole from Heru and Set. Now this cycle is really the Ausar and Set contention story. Esau, when it was time to give birth, Esau came out covered with red hair, as if he were wearing a hairy garment, and his heel was grasped by the hand of Jacob and so forth, the second born. When you look in our Khan culture, and they say Jacob and his twin brother Esau, Ausar and Set were twins. Ausar, Auset, Set, and Nebuchadnezzar. These were twins, quadruplets. So, in our Khan culture and Yoruba culture and others, certain groups on the continent, you have twins. The first twin that comes out is the younger one. Cosmologically, the younger one is sent out to survey the terrain, prepare the terrain for the coming of the elder. So they come out first. They scout out the terrain, clear out any blockages and so forth, and then they say the elder can come. So the first twin is the younger one, and then the second twin that comes out is the eldest. So that's in Afuraitkaitnit. In European culture, the first twin is born, that's the older one because it came out first. The second twin is the younger. In our culture, the first twin you know, is the younger and the second is the older and so forth. So, but so she gave birth to Esau. So Esau has the red hair, hairy, rough man, desert and all that. His name is Edom, and that comes from Adama and the red earth and so forth. That's stolen from the title of Atem in Kamit. But once again, Esau is the red, hairy one and the rough man and so forth. That's another title of Set. Set is the red one. He's literally called Desher, the red one who governs the desert, the red land. He's the rough red one from the desert. He's not the refined one of the black fertile land and so forth. He's the rough man of the desert. So that's Set. And then Ausar, Set, the trickster, also the god of the desert, the red one and so forth. That's Set. His name is also written Sut. So that Set is Iset, not Isut, Esau, or Esau. Esau is Isu, that is Sut, that is Set. That's where they stole the name from. Now you have Ausar, and we're going to look at one of his titles, and then we'll show some cosmological pieces to that. When you look at the title, Jacob, and they'll talk about heel and so forth. Let's get into another, give you one little quick etymology before we go forward. You look at etymology of Jacob. You also see it can also be taken to mean may God protect and so forth. The name comes either from the Hebrew root Qeb, to follow, to be behind, but also to supplant, to circumvent, assail, overreach. So to follow, be behind, supplant, circumvent, assail, or overreach. Now, why would they say that about, we said this is Ausar, and we already have Set or Isaiet or Esau or Sut, Esau, Isu, which is Set and so forth. Now you have Ausar. So when you look in the book of the Duat, the book of the underworld, the 12 hours of the night, the boat of Ra sails across the sky. He's Ra sailing across the sky in the boat of the Aten, the sun and so forth for the 12 hours of the day. Then he sails in the underworld for the 12 hours of the night. This is an image from the 12th hour of the night, when the boat is in the underworld, is sailing in the underworld and so forth. And then eventually, right before it goes through this little hole and goes back up into the sky to at sunrise and so forth, to go back into the morning and the dawn. This is the final hour of the night when darkness is beginning to dissipate and the solar disk is about to go up in the earth, in the sky once again and so forth. You see the deity Nu, the father of Ra, holding the boat. This is the wave energy in the underworld and so forth. This is the boat of the deities. You have Khepra, the beetle, the solar disk, and Ra's inside of the solar disk. Upside down, you see the goddess Nut. She's the goddess of the sky, and she's about to receive the sun in the sky. She's going to capture it and pull it in the sky. But she's standing on the head of this divinity whose body is surrounded in a circle, reaching back in a circle. Circumvention, overreaching, circumvention. This is actually Ausar, whose body makes up the Duat. So let's look at that real quick. So they're describing the, the 12th division or 12th hour of the night. It's called Deshert Bayou. Remember we said Deshert means the red. Bayou means spirits. He said red souls, which are really red spirits. But Deshert means the red and so forth. In front of the wall are two poles, each of which is surmounted by a bearded head and so forth. That's the bearded head and the two poles and all that. And they're just describing what's being seen. Close to the pylon, red souls or red spirits, was the pylon of the serpent deity Reri, each side of which was guarded by the two Yurei of Aset and Nebuchadnezzar. When Ra had passed through these doors, he emerged triumphantly from the Duat, the underworld, and his boat floated on the waters of Nu into the sky. So he left the underworld and went up into the sky. In the scene in which this is depicted, we see the boat containing the beetle of Khepra, which we just showed, and the disk of Ra with the 5 deities, Seb, Shu, Hek, Hu, and Sa, and the 2 deities, goddesses are Set and Nebuchadnezzar, and 3 gods of pylons. The god Nu is seen holding up the boat with his hands, which come forth from the water and bear up this god. A little distance away from the boat is a sort of island which is formed by Ausar, the body of the god being bent round in such a way as to cause the tips of his toes to touch the back of his head. He's circumventing or circumambulating and so forth, this Duat underworld and so forth. The text says that it is Ausar himself who forms the encircling border of the Duat, of the underworld. He's the one that regulates, he's the king of the spirit realm, the underworld and so forth. His body encircles that, circumvents in the true sense. On the head of the god stands the goddess Nut, with arms outstretched ready to receive Ra, and she's going to receive him in the sky. Thus the god reaches the end of the Duat and passes by an opening through its border, which is painted black, which is that little dot right there, dotted everywhere with red spots. We have seen that Ra was omnipotent in all divisions of the underworld except one, which was sacred to Ausar. In this, neither Ra nor his name appears. So Ausar is the one who takes the form of, encircles the entire underworld, the spirit realm and so forth. He reaches back, quote unquote, overreaches. Now, that's what they were saying about they don't understand the true etymology of the name Jacob, but they know it has something to do with supplanting or overreaching or circumventing or going back and so forth. Ausar is taking that form, but what's important about that is the title. Qeb, the internal coils of a serpent, Qeb, the mythological serpent and so forth. Qeb, to double, to increase. But the important part, when you see this medut right here, circuit, company, group, order, series. It's talking about a circuit. The circuit of the Delta, the circuit of the Semeru, a great assembly. Qeb, a group of people. A company, a multitude. That's a circuit or collection of people. His body is in the form of the Qeb or the circuit. In that rendering right there, that imagery, that iconography, this is Ausar as Qeb. He's the one who's the circuit of the Duat. He circulates or encircles the spirit realm, including the company or the group of people, the company, the multitude. Qeb or Akeb or Yakeb or Jacob encompasses a group of people, the children of Jacob and so forth, the quote unquote Israelites. He's the circuit that encompasses or encircles everything. Also said he was a supplanter, took over. The reduplication of Qeb is Qeb, Qebit, to overthrow, to defeat, to massacre. He defeated Esau, Ausar defeats Sut or Set. We look further in the, Shabaka text, they talk about Ausar being triumphant, overthrows Set and so forth at the end. But he's the supplanter, meaning the one who overthrows or defeats. Qeb. Qeb-Amentet. Amentet is the spirit realm. That's the title of the spirit realm, meaning the hidden land. Qeb-Amentet is the abode of the heart of Ausar. Ausar is in the form of Qeb, the divinity, as Qeb, the circuit. He is Qeb, or Aqeb, which is later corrupted into Yaqeb, or Yaakov, or Yaakov, and Jacob, and so forth, the one who encircles or encompasses an entire group of people, or regulates an entire group of people. When they talk about the 12 sons, later in the Greek traditions and so forth, and pseudo-metaphysics, they'll talk about Jacob is the sun, and the 12 sons are the 12 signs of the zodiac. Prior to that, when we talk about Ausar as the divinity, Qeb, the circuit, also the supplanter, the one who overthrows, Set or Iset or Esau or Sut, Esau and so forth. He governs Orion, and he has 12 assistants, 12 deities. So that's that Qeb right there. Now, and in fact, just to prove this point about him ultimately overcoming Set, we go back to the Shabaka text. We already talked about, Geb, commanding that Heru took the full portion. So when we go further down in the text, because they talk about a number of different things and the cosmology of, Ptah and so forth. Then they talk about how, when we talked about Ausar being killed, Set finds his body. She engages in a spiritual ritual, pulls his seed from him through spiritual ritual. His spirit connects with her. She becomes pregnant with Heru. Heru grows up, and he defeats Set and so forth and restores order. Then they go back to resurrect Ausar. Heru, his mother Set, and his aunt Nebuchadnezzar, they go back to resurrect Ausar. This is the text that talks about that. The burial of Ausar in the house of Seker, Set and Nebuchadnezzar without delay, for Ausar had drowned in his water. Set and Nebuchadnezzar looked out. Then the text is damaged a little bit, said his drowning. Heru speaks to Set and Nebuchadnezzar. It's important when it says Heru speaks to Set and Nebuchadnezzar. Heru was already born. Heru was also already grown. So this is the second resurrection. The first resurrection is when Ausar is resurrected so he can impregnate Set, and she gives birth to Heru. The second resurrection is when, after Heru is grown and so forth, they together resurrect their father for a specific reason. Heru speaks to Set and Nebuchadnezzar. Set and Nebuchadnezzar speak to Ausar. We come, we take you, brought him to earth at the royal fortress to the north of a certain region. There was built a great fortress. Geb speaks to Tahuti. Some of the text is damaged right there, but hold on 1 second. Now, so that portion was recaptured in section 5b. The great throne of Min-Nefer, that gives joy to the heart of the gods in the house of Ptah, is the granary of Tenen, the mistress of all life, through which the sustenance of the two lands is provided, owing to the fact that Ausar was drowned in his water. Set and Nebuchadnezzar looked out, beheld him, and attended to him. Heru quickly commanded Set and Nebuchadnezzar to grasp Ausar to prevent his drowning. They heeded in time and brought him to land. And here's the key portion. He entered the secret portals in the glory of the lords of eternity and the steps of him who rises in the horizon on the ways of Ra at the great throne. So he rose up into the sky in connection with Ra. He entered the palace and joined the gods of Tanin, Ptah, Lord of Years. Thus Ausar came into the earth at the royal fortress to the north of this land to which he had come. His son Heru arose as king of Upper Kamit, arose as king of Lower Kamit, in the embrace of his father Ausar, and the gods in front of him and behind him. So at that point, Heru had, waged war, but then Ausar comes, they resurrect him, he goes up into the heavenly realm, and now he's ruling in the heavenly realm. Heru is ruling on earth. Ausar has defeated Set, and then there are texts in the pyramid text when they talk about Ausar's place on his throne, and he forces Set to submit, and so forth. So Ausar has overcome the quote-unquote supplanter, the one who overthrew Qeb, the one whose body Qeb encircles, is the circuit of the duat and so forth. Qeb or Aqeb, Qeb and so forth, controls or overthrows Isu or Esau and so forth. The red one, the hairy one, the desert one, and all of that. This is what we're talking about. There's a question about the Jacob's ladder and so forth, and that ladder is actually in the Book of the Dead, so-called Book of the Dead and so forth. You'll see here, the god Ausar even was believed to have needed a ladder and to have been helped to ascend it by Ra and Heru, or by Heru and Set. The idea of the need of a ladder was deeply seated in the Egyptian mind. For when the custom of placing models of ladders in the tombs ceased, or even to go up a little bit further, at a later period, it was thought that a ladder was necessary, certainly for those who did not live near the mountains whose tops touched the heavens floor. And in many tombs, models of ladders were placed so that the deceased might make use of them at the proper time going into the heavenly realm. Ausar was believed to have needed a ladder. And hold on one second. Pictures of them in the papyri of the Book of the Dead, which were placed in tombs. The model of the ladder, maquette, could be made as long as the deceased wished by reciting certain words of power over it. And by similar means, the picture of the ladders given in the papyri could be turned into real ladders. So, hold on one second. Let me make sure we can. Okay, you didn't see that part. Let me go back. This is what I was just reading from. This is Gods of the Egyptians, but when you look in the Runu Pertinent Meru, and we'll send that link out to the actual chapter and text, because you will see the image of the ladder in the Runu Pertinent Meru, so-called Book of the Dead, and the text associated with that. Says the god Ausar even was believed to have needed a ladder and to have been helped to ascend it by Ra and Heru, or by Heru and Set. The idea of the need of a ladder was deeply seated in the Egyptian mind, for when the custom of placing models of ladders in the tombs ceased, they drew, so instead of putting models of ladders, they drew pictures of them in the papyri of the Book of the Dead, Book of Coming Forth by Day, which were placed in the tombs. The model of the ladder, the maquette, as you can see, this is the ladder, could be made as long as the deceased wished by reciting certain words of power over it, and by similar means, the picture of the ladders given in the papyri could be turned into real ladders. So yes, this notion of Ausar ascending the ladder, Heru and Set is helping him to ascend the ladder to go from the physical realm to the spirit realm and so forth. That text in the Shabaka text that we just read, when they said he entered into the royal fortress near Ptah, Tanin, or Mennefer and so forth, and went into the heavenly realm, the means by which he went into the heavenly realm, you'll see that in the pyramid text, the Meru text, as well as the Book of Coming Forth by Day, and they show an image of the ladder, and as they said here, ladders in the various tombs and so forth, physical, carvings of ladders, but then later on they would draw the ladders in papyrus and with the related text, and affect the spirit climbing the spiritual ladder to get into the spirit realm. So once again, associated with Ausar, which is Qeb, the quote unquote supplanter, the one who overthrows and so forth, but also Qeb's ladder, or Aqeb's ladder, so-called Jacob's ladder. Now, there's one more piece that we want to talk about. This is the precinct of Mut, the great divinity Mut, great mother goddess Mut, in Aset, Apetu, or, so-called misnomer Karnak, one of the temples that we visit when we go to Kamit. And what we have here, of course, this is also in the temple of Apet Asetu. It's Amen and Amenet. But this is the great triad, Amen, Mut, and Khensu, also called Khensu, Neferhetep, Peru, and so forth. Amen and Mut and Khensu. They're prominent throughout Ta'apet, so-called Thebes and so forth, but other places as well, but you'll see them because their great temples and sanctuaries are there. And the temple of Apet Asetu, or so-called Karnak, is the largest religious complex in the world. So the great mother Mut means mother. Mut also means water, ocean. So the water itself is Mu or Mut, and she's the great mother of the oceans and so forth. Everything comes out of the ocean. That's why she's a great mother. Amenet is the great mother, period. But then just like you have Amen and Amenet, the great mother, great father, and your being, you're the great being. But what's the most abundant substance within your being is Mu or Mut, which is water. So she's the great mother, and all the organs exist within the water, within the body, just like water is the most abundant resource on earth, of course. There's a water that permeates the entire great, body of creation that is Mut on the feminine side and Mu on the masculine side and so forth. So that's who she is. That's why she's one of the great mother divinities. This is the temple of Amen in Ta'apet, Per Amen. And then this is the precinct of Mut. It's a certain region of precinct within that temple complex with a number of smaller temples in it. And it's encircled halfway by this great lake, Asherer. That's what that is. Now, so once again, this is just another picture of that. And this is a little temple right here, so you can see how large this lake is. It's the sacred lake of the great mother divinity Mut. Ritual purifications for the divinities, for the people, done in that sacred lake. She's the great mother that governs, everything is born out of the water, even the landmass itself. The entire earth was covered by water, covered by Mut, and then she gives birth by the landmass rising up. The first landmass of earth becomes Afuraitkaitnit, Afuraitkaitnit, Africa, and so forth. Plant life, animal life, mineral life, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, human life, ultimately is born of and nourished by Mut. So everything comes out of that and everything is purified by that. Now, that sacred lake, Ishmael, that's the name of the lake. Some will spell it Asher, now they spell it Isher, but there are two different spellings. There are a number of different spellings here. The quarter of Thebes that contain the temple of Mut, and that sacred lake is, in that, surrounding that temple and so forth. So you see the reed, which is the Ah, but also I. This is a cistern of water, this rectangular, which is the Sh sound. Then the open mouth, which is the R sound, the R sound. And when you say your mouth is open like that, that's the or R sound. So that's Sh, and Isher, or Isher. And then you have the three wavy water lines that shows that this has to do with water. There's another version, which is Ish, I, and then the Sh sound. And then the lion, once again, is the R. So this is Isher. And this is also Isher. But then they have the little chick, which is the U, which is Isheru, Isheru, Ishreru, Isheru. And then the wavy water lines, which is determinative. Then another spelling. But here's two separate spellings which are important. which is the reed, the sh sound, the r sound, and then another r. Ish, rer, ish, rer. And then you have another spelling, the reed, the sh sound, the cistern, the open mouth, which is r, and then the lion, which is a different r. Ishrer, ishrer. And the determinative symbol, the newt symbol that represents it's a nation, it's a polity, a political entity. Ishrer. The root of the term, meaning fire or flame, roast meat, daily burnt offering, ritual sacrifice to a divinity, and so forth. Then the root of ishrer or isher, sheriu, the lesser divinities, but also, which is important, sher, shera, the root of isher or ishrer, or ishrer, to stop up, to block, to wall up, to close, to obstruct the passage. Sher, sherat, obstruction, a bar. Sher, obstacle. Sher, bond, tie, or fetter. And then you have Ausar, who is within Isher or Ishrer. And some of you can already see what we're talking about is Ausar, which is Qeb, within Ishrer, which is corrupted into Ishrer and Israel, Israel, and so forth. Now let's look at the silly little cosmology that they talk about with regard to Jacob and why he is called Israel, and then you'll see where that comes from. And it ties in, of course, to the functioning of Ausar. So as usual, when they're writing about these terms, they don't know the origin of it. So they'll talk about children of Israel and all of that. Hebrew, Israel, and Septuagint in the Greek, and they'll have these different things, and it's often interpreted as struggle with God. In these phrases refers to the patriarch Jacob, who, according to the Hebrew Bible, was given the name after he successfully wrestled with the angel of the Lord. Jacob transported his family and flocks across the ford by night, recrossed back to send over his possessions and all that stuff. There, a mysterious being appeared, and the two wrestled until daybreak. Jacob, or Qeb, wrestled entity to daybreak. When the being saw that he did not overpower Jacob, because Jacob, Qeb meaning to slaughter or overthrow, so he couldn't overthrow Jacob. He touched Jacob on the sinew of his thigh. And as a result, Jacob developed a limp and so forth. Because of this, to this day, the people of Israel do not eat the sinew of the thigh and all that. Jacob then demanded a blessing, and being declared in Genesis that from then on, Jacob would be called Israel, Ishrael, or Ishrer, the one that struggled with the divine angel, one who has prevailed with God, a man seeing God, he will rule as God and all of that. So it says, because the terminology is ambiguous and inconsistent, and because this being refused to reveal his name, there are varying views as to whether he was a man, an angel, or God. So they have these different debates about, what the origin of the name Israel is. And let's look at that. Israel, one that struggled with the divine angel, one that prevailed, or a prince with God and so forth, to prevail and so forth. So he's tending flocks, and then somebody comes after him. Now he has to contend with this individual. He's fighting this individual, going back and forth. Now let's look back at the actual cosmology. Ausar is in ishrer, and the root of ishrer, isher, obstruction, obstacle, to stop, to block, to obstruct passage and so forth. He was fighting with him until the daytime, fighting all the way up until the daytime. So there's obstruction, there's fighting, sher, fighting, obstruction, and so forth. Eventually he overcomes him. And then he gets a blessing. So there's an association with a region. Eventually, the region, the sacred region, this sacred region of Mut, the precinct of the Temple of Mut, is called Asher, a quarter of Thebes that contain the Temple of Mut. Then there's a sacred lake within that region that's governed by her, where the ritual purification takes place. It's a sacred place, one of the most sacred places in ancient Kamit. But the whole precinct, that quarter of the city, is called Ishrer. So there's a quarter of the city called Israel, corrupted into Israel in ancient Kamit. This is where they stole the term from. The sacred purification place. Isher, where the fire, flame, roast meat for the daily burnt offering. So he's fighting against a spirit that's a divinity. He's contending with a divinity, a divine being, and so forth. And then he receives a blessing. And when you talk about daily burnt offerings, ritual invocation, ritual sacrifice for the quote unquote blessings of the divinity, that's what's taking place. When he's fighting against this sher, plural sheru, the lesser deity, meaning one of the gods or goddesses, in their language they would say an angel. He's fighting one of the sheru and so forth. He gets that title. There's obstruction, binding, and so forth, but he fights through it. But once again, if you're talking about he meets with the divinity and he contends with the divinity until daylight. In the 12th hour of the night, Ausar, in the form of Qeb, the one who's encircling the duat and so forth, the circuit, Qeb is contending with the spirit until daylight. The 12th hour of the night is the time period when darkness dissipates, and then daylight comes and the boat of the Aten, the sun, goes up into the sky. He's Qeb, circuit and so forth, receives, transmits the, of course he's fighting Set and so forth, fighting the darkness and so forth. And then the darkness is dissipated by the light of Ra. And then he gives through the goddess Nut, the solar disk goes out of the sacred boat that's in the underworld. Ausar gives it to the goddess Nut. She takes it into the sky, and then the light comes, it dissipates the darkness. He contends with the, divinity until the daylight comes, then the blessing comes and so forth. They talk about Ausar going up with Ra into the sky. We just read that from the Shabaka text. So after Ausar is resurrected for the second time, then he, with the assistance of Heru, Aset and Nebuhet, then he goes into the royal fortress in Mennefer and everything, goes up into the sky and functions as a divinity with Ra and everything in beauty and excellence and all of that. So, but first he has to contend with darkness until the daylight comes. And when he's contending with darkness, he's Qeb. Qeb or J-Qeb or Ya-Qeb is contending with darkness, contending with the divinity of darkness, which is Set. When he overcomes that, he goes up into the sky. He becomes, who does he become after that? He becomes Ausar im Ishrer, Ausar in Israel. So that's the place of Ishrer, the place of purification, going to the sacred waters of Mut, ritual purification. When you see the sacred lake of Mut and so forth, that they would talk about the deities going to that lake to purify themselves, as well as the priests and priestesses performing those purifications for the people themselves. So once he gets to finish contending with the darkness, fighting with the divinity until daylight comes, then he goes up into the sky to be with Ra, as the Shabaka text says, and there's a purification. He's Ausar im Ishrer. So that's where the whole Israel comes from. That's connection to Ausar. And then there's one other piece we want to pull up real quick in our book, Kamit, Hena Nsoro. Well, two other pieces, but we mentioned this earlier in the course, but just so you can see that when people talk about the metaphysics of, the biblical characters and so forth, and there's certain things that they know about and certain things they don't. Later on, yes, the Greeks will talk about this and Gnostics and so forth. Jacob representing the sun and the 12 tribes are the 12 signs of the zodiac and so forth. Later on, that was, that's how they would be interpreting these things. But originally, when you're talking about Ausar and the 12 quote unquote sons of Ausar, or 12 deities who are his attendants, when you look in the Runu Perd and Meru, we talked about this before, the 7 cows and their bull, which is the 7 Het Heru divinities, sometimes 7 cows, sometimes 7 women, the 7 Het Heru. That's the Pleiades star system. Right next to the Pleiades star system, when you look in the sky, is the star constellation of the bull, Taurus, but that is Ptah Men right here. Then next to that, these 4 rudders plus the 12 bearded male divinities. Those 4 rudders represent the 4 sons of Heru. And then you have 12 divinities who are the 12 assistants of Ausar, who is called Ausar or Ausar Orion. The Europeans call this the shield of Orion, and then this collection of stars is Orion the hunter. We have the proper information, the 4 rudders of the sky, and sometimes they're shown in 4 divinities, the 4 sons of Heru, Amesti, Qeb-Ausar, Dwamutef, and Hap, the 4 sons of Heru. And then that's the shield. And then these 12 divinities are actually called, you'll see these 12 divinities pulling the boat of Ra in the underworld, but they're also called the Sahu 12, the 12 stars of Orion. There are 12 deities who are attendants of Sahu. Chapter 148 in the Papyrus of Ani. If you look at chapter 148 and you look at the end of the text, you will see the image. And you'll see this kind of image of Ausar in his pavilion. These are the 4 sons of Heru. The 4 sons of Heru, which they'll say is the shield of Orion. Then you have Ausar, but then you have 12 assistants. So when you see the second portion of the chapter 148, that's what it looks like. I just wanted to see if they had it all together in one picture. Actually, this is the picture. This is the picture right here. They have it on the front cover of the book, but that's the actual picture. And that particular one is Seker Ausar, the form of Ausar is Seker Ausar and so forth. But that's, when they're showing him as Ausar in his pavilion with those 12 stars as his attendants, as Sahu, or Osiris, Orion, Ausar, Sa, and so forth. The only other piece, which people have written about this, and is, kind of some common knowledge, but for people studying some metaphysics and so forth, but Jacob asked the being's name, but the being refused to answer the spirit that he was fighting. Jacob named the place Penuel, meaning the face of God, saying, I've seen God face to face and lived. So when you're talking about the pineal gland or the quote unquote third eye and so forth, when they say he went up and fought this being and he fought him in the place of the pineal and he was able to see God face to face, and the third eye allows you to see in the spirit realm and so forth. That's what's being talked about. But let me just show, since we're talking about it's the divinity Ausar, and then we'll be done. In our book, Akaradim Bosom, the pineal gland is the realm of Tahuti, and it's a light sensitive gland, but the pineal is the assistant to the pituitary. The pituitary gland is the master gland, and that is the seat along with the endocrine system, but that's the seat, the pituitary gland of Ausar. And then the pineal gland is the assistant, just like you have the king and the spokesperson, it's the pituitary gland and the pineal and so forth. So, but he did go up into the brain area where the pituitary is, the master gland, and contend with the spirit, and then he was able to see. In Akan, you have the Adinkra symbol with the eye and the throne and so forth. And when you see the eye associated with the throne, Abodie Santen, representative of Ausar, then you look at the way Ausar's name is spelled in ancient Kamit, it is actually the throne and the eye. And that's how his name is spelled, Asari and so forth, or city and so forth. So, but when they talk about pineal or pineal and so forth, the pineal gland, the reason why Jacob is in the region of the pineal gland is because Ausar is in the region of the pituitary and pineal bodies. That's the seat of the divinity. And just so you can see that, where we mentioned that in our book, Asi or Awusi, Asir, spirit force as a regulatory function in creation. He regulates the functions and operations of other abosom, just as your pituitary gland regulates the functions and operations of other glands of the endocrine system within your body. So does Asi or Asir as a divine organ regulate the functions and operations of the various other divine organs, deities, abosom within the great divine body. And we started talking about the endocrine system. But this is what we're talking about. In our chart with the deities that govern the different parts of the body, you see Awusi Ausar governing the endocrine system, just like Aset, Ajwa governs the reproductive system, and Heru, Yao governs the cardiovascular system, and Awuku, Set governs the nervous system, as we said. So the 11 major system governed by these 11 major divinities in Akan and ancient Kameti culture, but Ausar governs the endocrine system, sends chemical directives through hormonal secretions that regulates the functions of other glands. It's a regulatory system within the body, and the pituitary gland is the master gland. So it's in the third eye region. Ausar or Qeb is in the third eye region. He becomes Ausar Ishrer, Ausar in Ishrer or Israel and so forth. That's where all of that comes from. Okay. Okay, so if you have any questions or comments in the chat room, of course, you can post those. That's the information we wanted to share to give some additional information that people are unfamiliar with, unaware of, and so forth. Sometimes you will see individuals talking about the metaphysics behind the Bible and so forth, but they never really studied the cosmology of Kamit. So they may be 25, 30% accurate, but some other things they just picked up from Europeans talking about pseudo-metaphysics, and it's not, Okay, so a question in the chat room, hold on one second. Okay, so it's a question, are the ancient Aperu nomads the Fulani people? So let's go back to this real quick. Okay. And by the way, so we mentioned, of course, in the very first week, we talked about Per and Peru and the crossover, and we talked about the whole cosmology of that. They talk about the deity Eber as possibly the ancestor, the grandfather of, Abraham and so forth. That Eber, we're talking about a region of Eber as well as the divinity. Eber, corruption of Aper, the god of the town, Aper, and so forth. That's where they get Eber from as far as a divinity or an individual who's the, head of the region. But you also see Aperu, boat equipped with everything necessary. Aperu, a crew or boat of a ship and so forth. Those who are equipped and so forth. And you'll see that the A sound, which is the forearm, open palm, the little gate or door, which is the P, and the open mouth, which is the R, Aper. Same spelling of Aperu and so forth. So Aperu is a title. It's a group of individuals. It's not an ethnic group. There was no ethnic group called the Aperu. That's a title. Now you will have, for example, a crew of a boat or a ship, a boat equipped with everything necessary, people equipped and so forth. Even when you look at the term Peru, when you look across the Near East, in different parts of the Near East, that term Aperu was already being used prior to the existence of the little myth and before the character, even the character they would try to say Abraham existed before so-called 2000 BC or whatever, the term Aperu was already being used. So they couldn't say, well, that was the origin of Hebrew, because they would say, well, Abraham was the first Hebrew and so forth, and then the people came after him. But then why you have all these people being called Aperu all over? First, they wanted to say, well, the Aperu are the ancient Hebrews. But when they started finding this term in different countries prior to the existence, and it had nothing to do with any ethnic group, then they couldn't say that anymore. They couldn't say, oh, we found the Hebrews outside of the Bible in a legitimate text. They couldn't say it anymore. So they just started saying, oh, well, those were just nomads, and the Hebrews were probably a part of them, and all this other stuff. They didn't want to give the proper etymology. So Peru, to go out, to come forward, to cross over and so forth. Even if you look at the landmass that emerges from the primordial water and so forth, just like we talked about, someone transitions, they die, their spirit leaves the body, then they cross the sacred river, they're ferried across, and they do the crossover. And they get into Pera, the crossover, after they go through the balancing of the heart on the scale and the interrogatory with Ma'ah. That whole crossover piece is, dealing with getting to the ancestral realm and so forth. So the whole Moses story, Ra going into the spirit realm, setting up the Sekhet-Hetep, the divine field of peace, the promised land, and those who want to come to Ra, they have to follow Ma'ah, share divine wisdom, and they can cross over. They can become Peru, or the ones who cross over and so forth. Even on a mundane level, when the primordial earth first breaks through the surface of the water to become the first landmass of earth, that's the first pair. It crosses over from the underworld, the watery realm, and breaks through and becomes, the earth itself. And then it's fully, all of the plant life, animal life, mineral life, and so forth is formed on that. So there's a crossing that takes place to issue, to come forth, to manifest, to outbreak, offspring, and so forth. The land comes forth, it breaks through, it crosses from the watery realm and crosses over into the land, the realm of landmass. And once it crosses over or comes forth and manifests, then paired also means, produce, offspring, fruits, and so forth. Let's look at that really quickly so you can see the relationship. Now, we mentioned this in the Kukutuntun, paired and pera, meaning born of and offspring of, but you need just to see a little bit more of that. Some people will see that words are spelled the same way, and pseudo-linguists will say, well, that they just spell differently and it's spelled similarly, but they sound different and they mean two different things. But when you understand cosmology, those words that are spelled the same and sound the same but have different meanings are tied together through the cosmology. And people who are pseudo-linguists don't get that. They'll say, well, this word is not the same. They sound the same, but they have different meanings, and you can't say that this word is related because they never studied cosmology, so they miss everything. And they'll write books and do lectures and everything else and be totally wrong. So for example, just to give you an example of that, the term per, meaning to come out, to come forth, also to cross over. And here's one of them, per, seed, progeny, posterity, descendants. That which comes forth is your descendants, your seeds, your progeny. Go up a little bit further. Pert, grain, corn, wheat field, produce of any kind. That's what comes forth. That's what manifests. That's what comes out. Per, greens, posterity, your seeds, your offspring, and so forth. But it's something that also exits, that comes out, that comes forth, that crosses over. It was in the underworld, and now it's living above earth. You go from the underworld to the upper world, you just crossed into another realm of reality. You go from the physical world to the spirit realm, you just crossed into another world of reality. So per, to come out, offspring is also per, to cross over. If you go from the spirit realm into the physical realm, meaning an ancestor is coming back into the world to be reincarnated, per, you just crossed over into the physical realm, and now you're born into the world. When you're in the womb of the mother and you're surrounded by water, by mut, and then the water breaks and you come out of the womb, you went from internal to external, you just pera, crossed over, pera. But then you're also offspring, pera. You're also progeny, pera. You're also fruit, seed, produce, and so forth. So all these things are related. And then when you see the related term, Aperu, abode equipped with everything necessary to be equipped. And you look at the term Aperu, the town of Aperu, and you see this term with this little garment that means equipped. Once you're born into the world, like the landmass itself, it becomes equipped with plant life, animal life, mineral life, produce, and so forth, everything that's necessary. You're born into the world and you take on a different form. If you're a spirit and you're crossing over into the physical realm to be reincarnated, then by virtue of the fact that you cross over then you become equipped with a new form, a body or a vessel, which is the physical body. When you transition from the physical world to the spirit realm, you leave the physical body, you cross over, and then you become equipped, with a spirit body. And if you lived in harmony, divine order, spirit body that's vibrant. That's the relationship between the garment, someone who's fully equipped, fully adorned, full accoutrements and so forth. So you see the term meaning fully adorned, equipped, fully ready, and so forth. And they'll say, oh, that's just somebody with a lot of clothing, a lot of jewelry, fully equipped and adorned and ornaments and so forth. But that's directly related to your movement, crossing over from one realm of reality to another. So yes, you have Aperu. You have a number of different groups on the continent that you have or Peru, or Paru, or Pelu, or like the Aperu, or Apelu, Pel people, Peul, which is Fula, the Fula people. That's in their name because they're nomadic people. And nomadic, when you look at the term, to go out, to go forth, like we just said, but it also can mean to go away, to depart, to leave one's country, to withdraw from a place, to proceed from, to be born, arise, and all of that. Nomads are Aperu, one who are moving from one place to the other. So it's not an ethnic group. If you just translated the general word Peru, or Peru to nomad, then there's no such thing as the ethnic group called the nomads. There are many groups that are nomadic and many groups that are not. Some that began nomadic and became sedentary, became agrarian, agriculturalists, and some who continue to be nomads. There's some who are semi-nomadic. So, but yes, the Fulad, and there are other groups that have that within their name because the ancient title, nomadic, that defines an aspect of their culture, is still within them. But they have other titles as well, not just Fula, they have other titles as well. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and end it here. We want to say thank everybody for taking this special class. This is the first time we taught this particular class to bring this information out in this way. We're going to upload this piece, and you'll have access to that. You can let others know that it's going to be one of the archived courses, and just to show that. So this will be this is literally the 35th course that we put forward. So when you go on the page where you logged in for this one and registered, you'll see, which includes the Aperu course. If there are courses that you have not yet taken, they're all 50% off. So the 6-week courses are $15. The 4-week courses are $10. We also have the manhood and womanhood course, which are separate. Those are 13-week courses. So those are $44 because it was originally $91. But the 4-week and 6-week courses are $10 and $15. So if you can look through the page, you'll see all the flyers from the original courses and so forth. Whichever ones you would like to access, you can access, and we'll send that out to you.